So I think that either my Peru sweater must be turning out better than people were expecting, or at this point everyone's just decided to let me around and find out. And you know what? Either works. Hi, hello, my name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. And today we are continuing the journey of my Rivendell pullover, aka my Peru sweater. And before we get into that though, today I'm drinking out of my candy corn mug to continue our Halloween mug collection. This is from Indigo, and out of it I'm drinking the Autumn Bold Tea from Keats & Co., which I think I was drinking last time. It's just a really nice, like, cozy, appley, cinnamony autumnal tea, and it's from Keats & Co., which I love because I love the Vlogbrothers who created it. If you also have been watching John and Hank Green for eons, we are secretly best friends and we just haven't met yet. But also all of their proceeds go toward making the treatment of tuberculosis affordable and accessible worldwide. There are just so many terrible companies in the world doing so many terrible things, especially right now, really revealing true colors in their allegiances. And I feel like businesses that are, instead of being like, how evil can we be, are like, oh, how many people can we help grant access to healthcare that is traditionally non-affordable in many parts of the world? Because again, see above, evil conglomerates. I feel like that's a mission worth supporting. So Keats & Co. makes such good tea. They make coffee also. I'm not much of a coffee person, so I can't really tell you anything much about that. The branding's also very cute. As someone who highly values cute packaging, recommend. Feels very like giftable also, if that's relevant to you this time of year. I did include them in my gift guide last year, so do enjoy them a lot. I have a coupon code if you're interested in trying them out for a discount. You can use that. So again, if you're interested in trying that out, highly recommend. Oh, I just felt my first sweat drop of the episode. What are my bangs doing today? Oh, the problem with bangs, and I speak with authority as someone who has had full bangs for a very, very long time, they look their absolute best like 1 millimeter away from being completely untenable to like exist or wear or be able to see. And that millimeter also depends on like exactly how like voluminous your hair is at the moment based on where it is in the wash cycle. So it's very touch and go. Oh, now I'm so aware of them, which is never productive. Anyway, as for what I'm wearing today, this is my Lyon sweater from Petite Knit, which I finished knitting earlier in the year this year, and I felt like it felt Halloween-y, particularly combined with my candy corn mug, which really highlights for me I feel like we've rebranded Halloween. I don't know if this is just me, but I as like a graphic designer professionally, I'm very keyed into like branding, and I just feel like when I was little, Halloween was orange and black. Like that was it. That was kind of the beginning and end of what Halloween theming looks like. And I feel like over time we decided that probably in the interest of like selling more cute Halloween stuff at HomeSense, we needed to like expand the color palette, right? So we've added like green and purple into the established Halloween color palette, right? So we've decided Halloween is just the secondary colors of the color wheel. And then I also feel like somehow stripes have been added in to Halloween. Like especially if it's black and white stripes, but kind of any stripes that are kind of in adjacent color stories, which considering the orange of this one, and then paired with the candy corn, I feel like it's giving pastel Halloween. And just realizing that is really driving home for me the rebranding of Halloween that I feel has quietly been happening. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, we'll move on. But if you know what I'm talking about, please validate me in the comments, because it kind of makes me feel like I'm losing my mind when I'm like, I don't feel like Halloween used to look like this. Like it's cute, but it's new, right? Anyway, this is not what we're here for. My Lyon sweater, this is a pattern that accommodates bust sizes between 31.5 to 59 inches. It is, I believe, a DK weight knit. And as far as cost per wear on this one, this project cost me $90 in total, which is less than it would have because I had gift cards that I used toward the purchase of some of the yarn for it. So it cost me $90 out of pocket, and I've worn it 19 times since I finished it earlier this year, which I feel like that's quite a lot of times considering that I only finished it this year, and also it hasn't actually seen like a full winter yet, right? Like I finished it in February, so it caught kind of the tail end of winter. It's not actually sweater season here yet. I am sweating. So its time has not even yet come, but despite that, we're already at a cost per wear of $4.73, which again, helped by the gift card. It would be worse than that if like half of this project hadn't been free, but you know what? A win is a win, and in the scheme of expensive knits, we will take it. But my Lyon sweater and the rebranding of Halloween are not what we're here for today. We are here to continue the journey of my Rivendell pullover, which I just dropped the working yarn onto the floor, onto Copper, who's sleeping like a little angel, just out of frame, so you don't get to see him. Apparently he's decided that his cuteness is just for me today, and you know what, I respect that. And he did not so much as flinch when that ball landed on him. He is wearing his Halloween bandana, which does make me hope that he will bless us with an appearance later on, but if not, I will pop in a photo. Anyway, that's also not what we're here for, though if you're not a little bit here for copper, I am kind of offended. So this is my main whip. My only whip. I'm a monogamous setter over here. So this is my Rivendell pullover by Sari Nordlund. I feel like I need to acknowledge, I feel like the energy is just a little bit weird today. I'm so tired. I just have had a very busy couple of days, and I feel like I woke up this morning and was like, oh my God, I don't have to go anywhere or do anything except record. I need to muster energy for like 2 to 2.5 hours, because it does take me that long. So like half an hour of that is like setup, but I do talk to myself here for 2 straight hours, which, like, particularly for an introverted soul such as myself, that's a lot. That's a lot of energy. So this is my one thing I need to do today. Other than that, though, I get to just recuperate from just so much peopling over the last couple days. And very good peopling with so much good food, but so much peopling nevertheless. And I'm tired. I just want to nap for like a week. But unfortunately, YouTube or no YouTube, that's not an option. So here we are. If you feel like the vibes are a little different today, that's probably why. If you feel like I'm a little extra off the rails today, that's probably also why. Anyway, let's carry on. So, Rivendell Pullover by Sari Nordlund. Let's run these project stats quickly. So this is a DK weight knit. This pattern accommodates bust sizes from 28.75 to 61.25 inches. I'm knitting the size 3 in the pattern, but I am wildly off gauge as usual. So I am aiming for more of the dimensions of a size 2, knitting a size 3, because Sari Nordlund and I have wildly different styles of knitting. But you know, fortunately, unfortunately, I love her style and her design. So it's a battle that I will inflict on myself time and time again, much to the distress of several of you. So I'm sorry, but I fear I am stubborn, and I simply will do the things that I want to do come frogging or high water. It's gonna happen, so sorry. And speaking of doing the things that I wish to do, even if they're ill-advised, I'm knitting this out of alpaca, which I picked up on my trip earlier this year to Peru, specifically when I was around the Cusco area. I picked up some alpaca from Menos de la Comunidad, where I got to actually meet the alpacas. They're so cute, and see how the wool is processed into the yarn and dyed, and it's super fun. And I was like, I want to make a sweater. I want to make a Peru sweater out of my yarn that I got in Peru, and that would be so exciting and so wonderful. I mean, come to find out that the entire internet thinks that it's a very terrible idea to make a sweater out of alpaca, but you know what? I feel like it's going fine. And I feel like after my last podcast episode, it seems that a lot of concerns were assuaged. In my first project update about it, where I'd only done kind of the trapezoid shape for the back, I got so much feedback of like, stop, turn around, do not pass go, frog this immediately, you do not want to make this project out of this fiber. And I was kind of like, I mean, first of all, I've already knit like this whole giant trapezoid, and I realized that in the scheme of a sweater, that's not a lot. But in the scheme of just like time spent knitting, it was many, many hours, and I was like, I don't really see anything going wrong that makes me feel like I need to frog it. And so if you've not been along for the whole saga of this project and the much cautioning that I have received around it, the general gist is that I guess alpaca has a tendency to really sag under its own weight over time. It doesn't have the elasticity of wool that like keeps it snapped up nicely into shape. So the idea is that your sweater just kind of gets like droopier over time. And like, I can see how in theory that could definitely like ruin something that you were really excited about, but also in my head I'm conceiving of this as kind of like an oversized drapey sweater anyway, so I just don't really see that being an issue. I also think that there are ways to mitigate these things, right? Like if my sleeves end up feeling too long, like sagging over my hands, I can maybe this is when I venture into like adding elastic into a wristband, right? Just to like cinch it up a little so that I can't do that. That could also be a thing that happens in the neckline if the v-neck ends up sagging down too far. I just feel like there are ways to mitigate this, and so much of this for me is about using this yarn that I got from my trip on a project that, starting from the point of the yarn, I was like, this is the yarn that I have that's really special to me. What do I want to transform it into? And that sweater's what I landed on. So I've had some feedback that's like, this is the wrong yarn for this project. And I'm just like, that's just simply impossible, because the whole point of this project is the yarn. And like, I get the sentiment, right? It's that maybe this yarn and this pattern aren't super compatible with each other, but I also think that's dependent on what you want to get out of it. And what I want to get out of this is a garment that I made using this yarn from a trip that's very special to me, and that anytime I wear that garment, I will be reminded of that and all of the cool experiences that went along with it, right? So like, Maybe my rubric is different. I'm like grading on a different scale here, but I'm really happy with how it's turning out. And like I said, I think in my last episode where I showed my project update, I think those concerns have been assuaged for a lot of people. I think that maybe the alpaca that I have is just behaving differently than some alpaca that other people have worked with sometimes and is giving a better result, because again, I mentioned this last time, but I had a lot of concerns about like stitch definition and like, you don't want to do cables in alpaca because you'll never see it. And I'm like, I feel like I see this as well as in any sheep wool that I could possibly have picked. So I think there's probably just a lot of variety in alpaca fibers you can get. There are a lot of different kinds of alpacas, but I feel like this one is behaving quite all right for this purpose. And again, if this sweater ends up being kind of loose and drapey, I'm already kind of aiming for that. So it will just be better fulfilling its life's purpose. And I will keep you posted over time on how it goes when I, you know, wear past sweaters in videos and stuff and check in on how they've been wearing, how they're working in my wardrobe. Which actually, speaking of, I wore this sweater many times on that Peru trip. Was I wearing that the day that I bought this? I have to find my picture of the day that I bought this, but I don't think so. But this sweater, very packable. This sweater I find is very flexible and like easy to throw on over things. It has more positive ease than a lot of other things. This is also not what we're talking about. Anyway, this sweater I will check in on in a similar way, you know? So we'll be able to see over time how real these concerns are about this stretching out. I feel like usually when I finish a knit on this channel, it's kind of, it's done insofar as I can give like a review of it. Kind of not as soon as it's done because I want to like wear it a couple times, but like after I've worn it a couple times, which I often have by the time I'm actually recording the episode, because I'm excited about a new thing I've finished knitting and I've probably worn it every day since I finished it for a few days. So I usually have that done. I feel like this is a case where I'm not going to be able to have kind of a final verdict for a while, for a few months probably, for these reasons, so that I can really speak like with authority about the degree to which it has or hasn't stretched out. But that was a lot of me defending a project that mostly everybody was like, you know what, actually I think it's fine last time. So I don't know. I feel protective over the sweater because it got so much slander to begin with. But here's where we are currently. So last time I gave an update, I was about here. So I had joined in the round after connecting the two fronts of the neck, and I was almost done joining the cables. And my plan from there was to finish the full front V motif and then switch to the sleeves shortly after that. So basically everything below here is just what was left on my ball of yarn. So I finished this V shape, and then I decided to just finish the ball that I was currently working from before switching to sleeves, just so I didn't have a ball dangling. And at that point, because that was my 5th ball of yarn that I was finishing for that, and just based off of that, based on the fact that it was the 5th, I was like, I feel like we're actually looking better for yarn quantity than it felt like to me when I was working on the yoke. Like I've been feeling like this is going to be a real yarn chickeny situation, and I'm not so convinced about that yet, which we'll get more into shortly. But just to finish the status update, so I finished V motif and continued the body until I ran out of that ball. And then I started my sleeves, which are in a confusing configuration right now because I am knitting them 2 at a time, and I paused sort of in the middle of the 2, like before I drop one and pick up the second one, because I just wanted to have a little bit more freedom of how to hold them up for you here. So I currently have this much sleeve, and to get into our yarn quantity updates, so I am knitting this with balls 6 and 7, right? And this is like 60% of each of those balls, because here I have 40 grams out of, these are each 50 gram balls, so it would be 100 if they were full. So we have 40 grams left, so this is 60 grams worth of sleeves, and I feel like that's more sleeve than I feared I might get out of that. So like we're gonna get almost that much again. These sleeves are tapering as they go, but quite slowly, not dramatically, so I don't think that's going to really noticeably impact the amount of length that I get out of a ball, but we're gonna get almost that again. And then I still have 3 balls left, so I think I need one to finish at least the ribbing on the body. I need to go back and look. Actually, I already wove in my ends, so I don't have a super accurate way of checking how much length I got out of the body from one ball, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to finish sleeves and then have like at least a whole ball to finish off the body, like if nothing else, just do the ribbing at the bottom. It's now, so because of where I'm at with these sleeves, the fact that they're set up 2 at a time, I'm not taking that off to try this on properly. It's way too annoying to set that up. But I did take a picture before I started the sleeves just so that you could see the length of the body and how it actually looks on. So with this length I've been talking about, I'm very prepared for this to be cropped. I think I would actually prefer this to be cropped anyway. So in the context of playing yarn chicken, not a concern. And so I think that this is at a length where if all I do from here is add ribbing, I think I'm very happy with that length. So I think that's in a good spot. That only needs one ball to finish, which leaves us with still a whole other ball for each sleeve once I finish the current ball, which again, I still have like 40% of each of those balls left. So I'm feeling actually much better about my yarn quantity than I was in my last update. I remember holding this up and being like, does this look like a third of a sweater? And some of you were like, no, it does not. So you know what? I think we're doing better than expected. Or this is just that thing where like projects just consume yarn at a pace that is confusing to me. Like I think I often feel like it's eating yarn more slowly or more quickly than I expected at one part of the project, and then vice versa on another. So I think I just need to stop trying to guess these things. But I feel like we're actually gonna be totally fine for yarn on this, which is very exciting to not have to worry about that, which sounds like a really great way to summon having to worry about it and this becoming a large problem. So something to look forward to in my next episode. Also just realized I never finished running the project stats on this. So speaking of being off the rails, let's get back to that. This yarn that I purchased for this project cost me $234.41 Canadian. This pattern cost €8.90 or about $15 Canadian. So adding that up, that puts our total project cost at about $250 Canadian. And looking at this pattern, this is a, I believe, European style construction, where again, you start with that trapezoid on the back and then you're picking up to start the two fronts and then you join in the round. I very much like this construction. I hadn't knit it before working my Lyon sweater, but since then I've done it a couple times and I really like it. I find it feels very like polished, and it's also a sort of non-stressful way to start a pattern. The initial getting started steps of the pattern are very simple, but you're getting to work it top down. It's not simple because it's bottom up, which I discussed this more other times. We don't need to get into it today. Bottom up is a tough one for me. Anyway, I cast this on about 5-6 weeks ago, so almost a month and a half in. It's definitely, the all over texture of this is making this move more slowly than some of my sweater projects do. Like I definitely notice that. I notice that the pace is slower, but I also find the texture just so satisfying that I'm like, you know what? I'm not mad about it at all. Like look at the seed stitch. It's just fun. It just feels cozy. My Barnsley sweater is another knit of mine that I wear a lot. It's like a waffle knit texture. There's something just very satisfying to me about a subtle all over texture in knitting, but I do also remember that one also felt like it took an eternity. So it's a trade-off. You work for that for sure, but it's like an aesthetic coziness. It's like in the way that even in the summer, I like want to be curled under a blanket, even when it's too hot for that. I'm like, this is not actually viable. This is not actually making me feel more comfortable from a temperature perspective, but just the coziness in like an innate way, separate from like a physical sense of temperature way. It just improves my quality of life. It's just an aesthetic of cozy. And I feel like there's a similar aesthetic of cozy to an all over texture knit that just really appeals to me. I hope we start to get more real fall weather here soon, because so far it's not really been sweater weather despite my best efforts. If I'm going outside, I need a sweater on, but inside my house, like without even any heat running, just the sun coming in, I'm like, it's too hot to be wearing this sweater. It's too hot to be wearing this sweater right now. I would not be wearing this currently if I weren't recording, and I am paying for it in my comfort level. So I would love to have more real sweater weather, because I would love to be able to be cozy in this sweater when I finish it and not dying, because I am told that alpaca is extremely warm. So we'll see how this fares. This might end up being one of these sort of most depths of winter sort of garments, but we'll see. And to finish running project stats, we're still doing that. The only thing I have left to tell you is that the pattern is written to be knit up on 3.5mm needles, but as mentioned, Sari and we live on different planets in this way. So I am knitting on 4mm needles, and still my gauge is coming out really small. So that's why I'm compensating by knitting a size up. Okay, now that we're actually done running project stats, what have I not already told you about this by derailing myself? Let me check my notes. God, how I wish it were possible to just like make my notes for YouTube and then edit my YouTube. Do all the parts of YouTube except sitting here actually saying it out loud. Like I like gathering the thoughts. I like editing the thoughts. I think that there will soon, if there's not already, be a way to do that with AI, which, you know, unfortunately I think is evil, so I won't be doing that. But this is the part that I find the hardest, especially when I'm tired. So nevertheless, we persist. So let's get into more of the sort of nitty gritty of the process. So last time, I can't put this on for you the way that I did last time, but so last time I was working the V-neck, like I said, right? And then I was continuing kind of down the outermost part of the V, because obviously that continues further down than like the ribbing or the cables do. So working along here in the chart, because it's a V-neck, you're making decreases kind of on the inside here, right? To get it to, oh, I'm like fully not in frame. Hi, hello. So as you're working down here, you're making decreases on the inside, right? To form this V point. But because we don't want the whole body to be getting smaller while that's happening, right, you have to make corresponding increases on the outside of the V. So basically just one stitch is like leaving the V-neck portion and just entering the body of the sweater. And for a good like inch and a half, maybe, I forgot to be doing that increase. And I was like, I'm really scared of ripping that back just because of all of the chart going on. I was just like, I fear that if I try to rip this back, I'm gonna make some sort of mistake in the charted portion and I'm not gonna be able to figure out what's going wrong. I'm gonna introduce some weird error in the chart that's gonna be, why am I a croaky? That's going to be infinitely more noticeable than any slight variation in like the exact straightness of that V line. So I was looking at it and let's see. I think that you can, oh, that's not the neck. It's hard to like get this to lay. So I think that it's like here, maybe, is the stretch where I wasn't doing the increases. But I think that honestly, like, I feel like it's subtle enough and is the kind of thing that like could also just happen as a result of imperfect tension in knitting. And also that I can just kind of try to pin a little bit straighter in blocking. Obviously the ideal would have been to not make this mistake. But I think that once my options were rip back and like hope that I can not mess up anything in the charted portion in doing that, or hope that it will just block out okay, and especially considering I don't feel like it looks bad now either. Like I felt like the best option from that point was just to leave it. So that's just gonna be what it's gonna be. Hopefully that straightens out a little bit in blocking, but if not, I don't feel like it's the end of the world. And then just to compensate for the fact that my body was decreasing a little bit, there is a point after you finish the V where the body is supposed to start decreasing a little. So I just decided I will just start decreasing it later because it's already been decreased by some amount accidentally. So we're just gonna roll with that in that way. And then once I got to the point where the ball for the body had run out, I decided to pause and just weave in some ends so that I could start on the sleeves without a bunch of loose ends dangling all over the place, because I do hate weaving in ends, but I just hate ends. So I also hate them flying all around and being in the way. And I just felt like, okay, this is a very natural pausing point in the project. I might as well get some of that done before I finish the project, have all of them hanging around and have to weave them all in at once, which is terrible. This is, I think, the one drawback to me of the European construction is that you do end up with more ends from sort of the beginning construction process of the sweater than you would have if you were just doing like a raglan or a circular yoke or something like that. So that is the drawback, is there are more ends. So I took a few minutes to get rid of those. Like you can see, this is like one of the woven in ends showing back here. So that is done. And then I was like, okay, I think it's time to start on these sleeves so that I can confidently get the nice cozy long sleeves that I want. And like I said, the body can be cropped, so that length can sort of flex depending on the yardage that I have available. Sleeves are a lot less negotiable for me. I've learned this through my knitting. Like, to me, one of the best parts of knitting is the fact that as a long-armed person, I can have sweaters that have the cozy sleeves that I always want them to have, and they never do unless it's a sweater that's like a million times too big for me. So this is high up on my knitting priority list, is sleeves that are as long and as cozy as I want them to be. So it was time to start sleeves, and as usual, I'm knitting these 2 at a time because once I learned how to do that, I simply could not go back. So the way that I have these set up on my needles is that the 2 underarms of the sleeves are here. So those are what's in the middle. Those are what I'm like hopping between when I'm switching from one sleeve to the other. And then the outside of the sleeve, which is where the cable pattern is on like the outer shoulder, that is on the outside of each of the needles. So I have these set up like non-traditionally from like when I've watched tutorials of how to set up sleeves 2 at a time. When I've seen them before, you're often doing like part of a sleeve and then you're doing one whole other sleeve and then you do like the second half of that first sleeve or something. And I don't like this configuration for several reasons. I think that it's the easiest to initially set up, but I find that it makes it much harder to keep track of where you are in what row. Like if you're supposed to be doing, say, decreases at the beginning and end of particular rounds when you're working on sleeves, like I find it so much harder to keep track of than when I'm just doing one entire sleeve and then another entire sleeve. That's just much simpler to me. And I also like that in setting it up this way, the inside edge is the underarm, because that is the part of the sleeve that I find is most likely to have any sort of weird tensioning issues from knitting 2 at a time or just knitting magic loop in general. If I'm gonna have anything weird happen, I would rather it be under the arm. And I find that the center point where you have like your cord and your needle, they are never coming together in quite the same way that the ones at the ends are. So things are just most likely to go wrong there. So I like that to be my underarm. Oh, my cord just popped through. I don't want to lose that. Okay. And then the other thing that I have chosen to do in setting these up to, again, mitigate any potential tension issues with the 2 at a time magic loop is that in this pattern, there are a few spots where you have a twisted knit stitch. And so I have just made my divisions, like where I split it in half, I have made that split right before a twisted knit stitch, which means that every time that I am switching from a back needle to a front needle or from one sleeve to the other sleeve, my very first stitch is going to be a twisted knit, which just helps to cinch up any potential loose tensioning going on from making that jump. So that has been working out really well for me so far. I don't really see any funky tension stuff happening on these sleeves at all, which I am very pleased about. On the underarm of these sleeves, we have like this twisted stitch seam that's running all the way up the underside. So that is like the first stitch that I'm making on each. There is an end on the inside here that needs to be woven in. That is not actually a giant stitch, that tucked right back in. And then this side is the cable pattern that's gonna run down the side of the arm, which is very pretty and is like an exact continuation of what's going on the front. You just don't have obviously the V-neck shaping. So that one, I haven't been using the chart for that like at all actually. The only thing that the chart matters for is to tell you which row to do your cable twists on. So I've switched to actually just using a row counter just so I know which row that's happening on. And other than that, like this pattern is so ingrained in me at this point that I do not need this chart. The one thing that I will say though about knitting these sleeves 2 at a time, this was the absolute worst one to do the initial setup of, like bar none, because so like not only like since I figured out that I prefer to have my sleeves set up this way rather than the traditional order of 2 at a time sleeves, it is more complicated to set up because it kind of requires like I always pick up my sleeves on separate needles. I do not want to be fussing with having another thing already on my needles while I'm trying to pick up stitches. I hate picking up stitches. We're not making that harder than it needs to be. But usually then I will just kind of like knit a row to just like establish what I'm doing, right? And then I will join them on the 2 needles. And because I'm doing it in this non-traditional order, it does require a little bit of extra thought because it's like, okay, I will need to kind of do half of this sleeve just in order for like the working yarn to be where it needs to be on both of them once I get them in this configuration. It kind of breaks my brain for like half an hour, but then it's worth it once I have it all set up. This one broke my brain for so much longer though, because so with the sleeves, it's like you have to pick up, you know, X stitches per X number of stitches. And so I did that, but I also, like in doing that, I think I had forgotten the fact that I think that the sleeve, like the armhole is just a like knit to X number of inches situation. So because my row gauge is very different than Sari's, I had way more stitches there than she does. So when I picked up at her rate, I ended up with like way too many stitches. And I was like, oh, right. And also, like, I think I'm not the world's best stitch picker-upper. And so it was not exactly, like, even on both, like, going up the sleeve this way versus going back down the sleeve, like, which side had more stitches than the other. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to do a round, like, decreasing this down to the right stitch count, it's important that I do that in a way that's going to mean that the distribution of those stitches ends up being pretty close to perfectly even. Because if it's not, this nice cable pattern is gonna be like on a weird spot in my arm, right? It will either be like too close to the front or too close to the back. It's kind of important that the chart be located in the center of the sleeve, which just meant that I was just doing so much counting and ratios and then trying to figure out how to get it positioned on the needle. It just took me so much longer to get these sleeves set up than it usually does. Now that they are set up this way, I'm so glad that they're set up this way. Like, it is genuinely so much easier to me to set it up this way than to be knitting one sleeve at a time. And even if I were only knitting one sleeve at a time, I would still have had to figure out how to center the chart right. That problem would not have gone away. It was just that I was having to do all of these things at the same time that I was just like, oh my God. I went from just like mindless seed stitching the body for several inches waiting for my yarn to run out to like, oh, this is like full time just staring at this knit. Like, I am not paying attention to anything on any TV. Like, we're zoned in. So that took some setup. I did not enjoy that setup. It was basically like the time that I had to knit that evening, all of it was allotted to just setting up the sleeves. And I was just sitting there going like, so glad that this will be there and ready for me to have fun tomorrow, because I'm not having fun today. So it was done. I did get it done, and I did have fun the next day. So one of those things that I'm very glad to have done, just like by far my least favorite part of the project, 100%. But I have really been enjoying working on the sleeves, especially, like I said, after just working mindless seed stitch on the body for several inches. It's such a change of pace to go to working these sleeves where like half of the stitches are charted, which is even more than when I was working the, why is this upside down? What's going on? More so than when I was working on the body, because working on this, like even that V-neck portion, once it's joined in the round, was still a much smaller percentage of the body than it is of the sleeve. So nice to have that change of pace on the sleeves. So far, I'm really enjoying working on them. And the small circumference of it all is bothering me less on this one than it sometimes does. I think maybe just because of the chart, like there's already this element where it's frequently like switching from the more mindless seedless into paying attention to, not referencing like an actual chart, but just having to read my own knitting and like understand what that means that I need to do next. So there's already sort of this cognitive switching back and forth between like higher and lower maintenance. So I think that the process of like, okay, now it's time to switch needles or switch sleeves, that little split second slowdown just registers less because it just matches the pace more of the overall project maybe. So I've really been enjoying working on these, and I feel like they're actually probably going to be at a point fairly soon where I can try this on without having to take it off of the needles, where I can just have my arms like trapped in front of me, but low enough that I can kind of stand in a somewhat natural way. So that'll be really nice to see, kind of get a sense of how much longer I need the sleeves to be, because I think from my photo of trying it on, I think that the shoulders do come down already quite a bit. So like there is some sort of cheated sleeve length. Like the sleeves don't actually need to be as long as my whole entire arm, I don't think. So we will see when I get to a point where I can try it on properly how much sleeve I actually think that I need, but I feel like they're coming along really nicely and I am pleased about it. I should probably though, do I need to try this on just so I know if the sleeve is a good size? No, I don't think so, because I remember when I tried it on before picking up for sleeves that like that armhole felt like a good size, and though I did, like I said, I didn't match her pickup rate by the time I had finished decreasing. Do I need to try this on? Can I get this on? Well, I guess I can get this far apart. Is this a terrible idea? We're gonna try it. I hope I don't regret this. Welcome to what I actually should be wearing in my house today based on the temperature. This is where it's comfy. It's not what we're gonna wear to record though. Okay. Arm. I guess I know I can resplit them in half. That's easy. If I do that, it makes these sit a bit more naturally. Okay. And then this is where we run into problems. Can't reach. And this is not sitting where it would sit. Okay, so I think I probably could have left more stitches in that, but I also think that like it's not tight. It just looks more fitted than I think it necessarily like needs to. But also, based on all of the cautioning about alpaca that I've been getting, maybe I can sort of stretch it outward. Let me go look at this in the mirror. Oh, no, I feel like that actually looks so much more natural in the mirror than I feared that it was maybe going to, seeing only this really weird, like, cropped version. I would say I'd take a picture for you, but my camera is set up here. I guess I need to get up. Ta-da. I really wasn't planning on trying this on camera today. That's why I, like, took a picture to show you, but we have ended up here nevertheless. Didn't bring my mic over here. We're really 10 out of 10 today, so sorry. I feel like I need to, like, crouch down here so you can get a better sense without being distracted by how much the outfit doesn't make sense. But yeah, I feel like sleeves, good. What a weird sudden try on panic I just had. And now to make my life harder again than it needs to be by putting on a sweater when it's too warm for a sweater, because we are nothing if not committed to the bit. And the bit's a YouTube channel about knitting, so I'm not gonna not wear it. Okay, oh, also, I am reminded that, speaking of me finding the small circumference of the sleeves a little bit less annoying this time, I think that another contributing factor to that is that I mentioned a few videos ago that I was having some of my interchangeable needle cords suddenly break. They just had finally worn out, I guess. And in ordering some replacements, I also ordered one that's longer than any cord I've ever had before. It's a 47-inch cord. And I decided to try that on these sleeves because I have found when I do 2-at-a-time knitting that often I really like it, except that sometimes, depending on how many stitches are in my sleeves, oh, I need to get these like re-split. I need to pull the tail out. By the time that I have all those stitches on the needles, there often isn't a lot of slack in the cord for me to use to do that split, by which I mean these two loops that hang out the two sides, right? This loop and this loop. And the problem when those aren't very long, when there's not a lot of leftover cord to do that with, is that it's very easy for them to accidentally just like pop back in, like for your knitting to just suddenly be traveling all around the entire cord and for there to be none left sticking out. And it just means that every time you get to that part of the round, you have to like pause and like remember where you're supposed to be switching and pull it back out again, when it's just sort of a cord length where it's like traveling loop isn't really working like it really needs to be magic loop, but it's just sort of, it's just shifting and it's not keeping itself in place because there's just not quite enough extra. So I've been finding that having this extra long cord has been really nice for that, because except when like just now I deliberately pulled out the extra so these loops weren't there for trying it on, they have not popped out and disappeared. So it's been very clear exactly where I'm switching, exactly what's going on in every round, and just those few extra inches. I think the other cord is what, like maybe a 40-inch, maybe a 36. So just having that extra length, I think, has contributed to making the 2-at-a-time sleeves even more of an improvement, which like I already would do this over 1-at-a-time sleeves every day of the week, but this has just made it even better. So if 2-at-a-time sleeves is something that you mostly like, but you do have an issue with losing your tail sometimes, I think it's super worth spending like $5. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was not a lot to buy an extra long cord. So I do recommend that as an upgrade. I will link the Etsy shop that I got mine from, but that might only be helpful if you use Luca needles like I do. Not sure. We'll link in the description. Yeah, so that's where we currently are. So based on the fact that I've now used more than half of each of the two sleeves, that means we are more than 60% through our yarn. And I do feel like this looks like 60% of a sweater now, so I feel much better about that. The yarn quantity perception has changed dramatically. And like I said, the all over seed stitch is definitely slowing the pace down a bit, but now knowing that I'm more than 60% done, the pace of this project doesn't feel as unusual as I felt like it might be when I thought that maybe I was just gonna like run out of yarn super early, right? Like it's like, am I 30% done or am I 30% done? Not even a whole sweater, but that's just what it's gonna be because of the yarn that I have. But so I feel like pacing wise, this is all starting to make more sense. There's something about a yoke that just takes up way more yarn than it should in my head relative to all the other remaining parts of a sweater. I don't know. I find myself frequently confused by sweater pacing, but I'm very happy with how the pacing of this one is starting to turn out after many weeks of like, well, we're gonna see. Another random note about this one, I'd mentioned in a recent video when I finished my Ardent top, which was knit out of like a cotton linen blend, I think, that I had developed a theory that, because I sometimes will get like dryness in my finger pads, they will like crack while I'm working on like certain knitting projects. And I was like, oh, I think I might have figured this out. Like I need to keep monitoring, but I think it might be when I'm working with like plant fibers or silk, like sort of non-fuzzy, non-woolly kinds of fibers. I think that's when I've been seeing this happen. And I don't know how exactly this feeds into this theory, because my cracked dry finger is back working on this project. So that doesn't necessarily prove or disprove, because alpaca is different than like sheep's wool, which is the main thing that I was thinking about in developing this theory, that like sheep's wool is the one that is most comfortable for me to work with. But I would have thought that alpaca would be more similar to sheep's wool. But maybe, because I know sheep's wool has lanolin in it. This is like the natural oil that the sheep produces. This is some of what you lose in the superwash process. The more rustic the wool, the less processed it is. Usually the more lanolin is still in it. And so I was thinking this probably helps kind of keep your hands hydrated while you're working with it. It would have less of a tendency to dry them out in the way that maybe a plant fiber or a silk might. So does sheep's wool have more natural oils in it than alpaca? Is it still true that sheep's wool would be the thing that wouldn't do this to me, and that alpaca just dehydrates in a similar way to a lot of like plant fibers or silk or things like that? Or is that not at all what it is? Like, is it a crapshoot? Is it another factor that I'm not aware of? Is it just the hydration state of my hands unrelated to what I'm actually knitting? So that theory, it's not disproven, but it's not proven. That theory is very much still open. Would be curious to know if this is a problem that you also have, where alpaca factors into that for you, because I don't really know what to do with this information just yet. This is very much still a theory in testing. And then one other thought that I had about this is when I'm doing the body ribbing on this, I'm thinking that I probably want to do this as a split hem, which I don't believe that it is in the pattern, but I'm just thinking that with the sort of drapier nature of alpaca, that a split hem might look better, might feel like more of a natural extension of that drape than if it's a traditional like closed ribbing that's sort of like cinching in a little, or even if it doesn't cinch. I just feel like a split hem might like drape in a way that looks like it makes a bit more sense, I think. And especially because I've sort of heard that it might tend to drape more like along the sides, that might again just fit better with like the vertical edge of a split hem, that might look more like purposeful in the draping and the sagging than a hem that goes all the way around. I don't know if that's actually true, but that's what I think. I think that that's what I'm probably going to do. I will start doing that. If I don't like how it looks, I can always like seam it up, or if that looks weird, start the ribbing all over again. Hopefully not, but that's what I'm currently thinking. I think that will suit this well. I think that will also work well with it being cropped, and just sort of have the option to wear it with like different rises of pants, and you kind of like see it peeking through the side or not, kind of depending on, I don't know. I just feel like that will help give it the most flexibility in how it's worn, probably. All right, now I think that's finally all that I have to tell you about my Rivendell. It's quite the saga, which brings us to a continuation of like acquisition / future plans. So this is discussions of the mystery hat project that is still kind of TBD whether it's actually going to happen or not, and this will partly depend, I think, on something happening very soon, which we'll get into in a minute. But so right now, my kind of next thing is that I think I've decided I'm going to do the muscle blur hat. I've gotten many diagrams explaining to me how it will work, and I think I can figure out how to put my own chart on the brim of a muscle burra in such a way that it will fold the right side up, even though I have zero spatial reasoning skills whatsoever. I think we figured out a process. But the next thing that I need to do is figure out what kind of yarn I need for it. And this is a little bit tricky because I think that the muscle burra pattern is so perfect if you're working from stash, because you can work it at any gauge. But that makes it hard to buy yarn specifically for it, because I'm like, well, what gauge do I buy? And at that gauge, how much yardage do I need? Like, it's just, there's less of a clear prescribed yardage amount because it depends on your gauge. So I need to do some kind of like researching and calculations. I think I need to look at like, what are the most likely weights that I might find myself wanting to buy for this, and in each of those weights, what yardage would I need? And the reason that I kind of need to calculate for these various contingencies instead of just picking one, like here's the yarn I want to buy, let's calculate it, is that I'm hoping to buy this yarn in person next weekend. So next weekend, which by the time you are watching this will be last weekend, I am planning to go to, not Rhinebeck, I am not going to the giant yarn festival. I am planning to go to a very small yarn festival that is much closer to me than Rhinebeck is, though still not particularly close. It's still quite a drive. But I'm going to Woolstock, and I'm hoping that the thing that I can buy there is yarn for this hat, because A, I don't really have another project that I'm looking to buy for right now, and I would like to make this hat. And B, that would actually totally circumvent my issues surrounding maybe wanting a break project between my Rivendell, which is highly textured, and the book club cardigan that's next up in my fall knitting plans. This muscle bar hat would be such a good break in between those two highly textured things, except that, as you may know, I'm currently on a yarn buying ban, and I'm not allowed to buy new yarn until I tap into my last existing project quantity, which is for my book club cardigan, so I've used up several now. My ban has been going well. But my one exception to when I'm allowed to buy yarn before that is if I'm at a yarn festival, which means that this yarn festival is my best opportunity to get yarn for this hat, because it does not require breaking my rules and lets me have still sort of a palette cleanser project without having to do what I discussed in my last video, which was sort of my contingency. And like, if I don't find yarn for this at Woolstock, that I could still follow my rules, still be practicing some self-restraint the way that I want to be by starting my book club cardigan, like getting it going past all the sort of initial annoying setup stuff that makes it hard to delve into a project. So I've tapped into it, I've gotten it going, I've done the parts that make me be like, maybe I just don't knit for a few days, so I don't want to do that. And then once I'm done that, then I could buy stuff for the muscle burra, start the muscle burra. But just as someone who really prefers to focus on one project at a time, that's still kind of like a mental hurdle for me. I would really rather not have to do that, which means that I would love to find the right yarn for this hat at Woolstock. But because it's going to be at a fiber festival, this is not an environment where I am going to be able to make good on-the-fly decisions if I'm not prepared with information ahead of time. Because I don't know about you, but if you've ever tried to make very precise calculations based on a lot of different factors and contingencies in a sort of fast-moving high stakes, like how high stakes is any of this ever really, but like a much more high stakes shopping environment that I'm usually buying yarn in, which tends to be online from the comfort of home with no rush, and I can calculate it when I feel like it and buy it when I feel like it. It's just a sort of environment where if I'm not prepared with the right information ahead of time, I can make mistakes in what I'm getting, or just not realize that I've sort of backed myself into a corner in ways that I didn't realize. Like, I think it seems to be working out well now for my Rivendell, but like when I was shopping for that yarn, the store itself, there wasn't any sell signal in there, and so I had no way of consulting my Ravelry, and so I was like, all I know is this is a DK weight yarn. I don't know how much of that I need to make anything. Like, I couldn't look at my favorites to see what the yardage was to even come up with what would be like a safe amount of this to buy versus what's like the least I could buy and still make a garment. Like, I really had nothing to go off of except the fact that they were sold by default packaged in balls of 10, and I was like, that's probably a reasonable number, right? Like, that was all I had to go off of. And so it's been working well, I think, so far. I think that's gonna work out, but I would just really rather be buying materials with the knowledge that I'm actually buying the correct amount, which means that I need to do some research before I go to Woolstock next weekend. So I need to look into that. But one of the other things that makes me really excited to shop for that project at Woolstock specifically is because this is going to be a gift knit. And I think that, I'm still talking about this very vaguely because I don't trust this person to not be watching this or to listen when I tell them to stop watching. But so I just think that the recipient of this gift would probably be a lot more likely to enjoy the look of variegated knit fabrics than I tend to, which this is so annoying to me because I love the skeins. They're so pretty. Like, I want to buy them. They're really fun to work up and to see the variation work its way into the fabric. But it just doesn't tend to be my favorite object in the end. Like, I prefer the look of it in the hank to the actual fabric that it produces. So I think it just might be a really fun opportunity to buy a really cool, interesting variegated yarn that's not something that I would normally wear, but that they might really like to wear. And again, because I'm planning to do the muscle burra, it's going to be reversible. My plan is that one side of it is going to be sort of a probably plain solid or maybe heathered color on the outside, and that's the side that will have the little color chart on the brim that I've been planning to do. But then the reverse side is going to be plain with no color chart, but maybe like a fun variegated yarn if I can find one that's that I think is nice and that they would like, but that also fits with the theme of the chart on the other side of the hat, which will all be more clear and make more sense in a future video when I can actually talk about what it is in full, because I'm not worried about spoiling anything. But another thing that makes this project, I think, really well suited to shopping for at Woolstock is that I think that this is actually a use case where superwash wool would make a lot of sense to use, which as someone who doesn't usually like to knit with that for myself, indie dye yarn can be hard to shop for because so much of it is superwash, which can make festival selection kind of limiting. And in this case, when I want superwash yarn, I think, so many more options are open. So it's much more of sort of a freeing project to shop for at a yarn festival than when I'm operating off of my own typical, like, for me sort of fiber criteria. So I'm excited to have a project to work on that's actually well suited to shopping a fiber festival rather than sort of trying to like retrofit the fun of a fiber festival. Like, it is so magical to see all of these different really cool skeins of yarn dyed by cool people in really cool creative ways, and usually it's just like, how can I use this in a way that doesn't look like how it's intended to look in the end, just because I like how it looks as a skein and I think it's a cool idea, and I'm like trying to make something work for me that's just wasn't really intended to work within the style that I'm usually trying to knit in. So I'm excited to have a project that actually feels like well suited to that kind of environment. So it would be nice to have something to look for. Just in the meantime, need to figure out what I'm shopping for in terms of like weight and what yardages correspond to the different weights that I might want to consider. So I have some homework in the next week. That's what I need to get done. And depending on how the next couple of weeks go, because again, I will have been to Woolstock a week before you're seeing this, maybe I will edit in some footage of that to kind of show you. I don't know. I don't want to tether myself to the idea that I like need to document that. Maybe I'll do a little check-in after that I add in, or maybe I will just talk about that in the next video. So we will see. But I just won't show you this if I'm not gonna edit it in. This is for me. I don't know why I'm still talking. Editing alley. I'm actually gonna wait and do a whole segment about that in my next video because I feel like I have enough things to say that I don't want to cram it into a little editing alley segment, that it can be its own whole thing. So we will touch base about Woolstock next time. Okay, I think that's all that I've got for you on the knitting front today. So let's get into some off the needles. Actually, pause. Is this still in off the needles? Because I want to talk small business shout out adjacent, but within a context that is still more knitting related. So maybe we're not in off the needles yet. Maybe we're still on the needles. But I want to ask, so I am planning to, later this year, sometime in November, put out another gift guide for knitters in the same way that I did last year of gift suggestions for crafty people in your life. And I would just like to know, if you are a business owner who sells things that you think that knitters would like, please tell me about it. I would love to include some of your businesses in that roundup. So please leave me a comment linking me to your business, or send me a message on Instagram or an email, whatever is easy for you. I would love to know what you're making and what the knitters around you might want to receive this holiday season. Now into off the needles we go. I do have a good reading update for you actually. So in my last video, we were discussing this book, which my friend Jan got for me, and we were discussing how beautiful the design is, transparency, just this is like book cover goals. This is so good. And I have since finished this book. So that is in and of itself a pretty good review, because I've been reading things pretty slowly lately. I've been having a hard time getting into a lot of books. The flow has been slow over here. And I finished this one pretty quickly. It was just very readable. Like I should probably tell you about it. The premise is that Julie's boyfriend Sam, no, I'm pointing the wrong way. Julie's boyfriend Sam has recently died, and one day when she's feeling sad, she calls his phone number just to hear his voice on his voicemail one more time, and he actually picks up the phone. And so it's a story of her sort of processing her grief through this like weird sort of dangling connection that she is still able to talk to him sometimes. And it's a really cool premise. I can't say that the book really hit me super hard emotionally. I think I expected to feel it a little harder than I did, but I also kept picking it up and kept enjoying reading it when I've been having a hard time getting into books lately. So I think that is a pretty good testament to it. I can give an even better testament though to the one that I'm currently in the middle of reading, The Scammer by Tiffany D. Jackson, which I said like only 1 or 2 videos ago, like I've kind of stopped talking about books when I'm in the middle of them, because I've kind of realized that I don't really want to be talking about books that I don't want to come here and be like, I'm not really liking this book, or it's going slowly, or whatever, when I'm still trying to see if it's going to pick up, or I don't know how I'm going to feel about it at the end. I don't care to be on the internet giving books bad reviews. My goal is not to make you not read things. So this is one where I'm just like, this is so, like, I already know this is a rave. I'm like 40% through maybe. It's already a rave. I am obsessed with this book. Last night, you know, I'm tired. We've been over this. I got home and I was so dead, but I was like, I just want to read it though. And I was trying to read it, like my eyeballs are like closing. I'm like, no, but I want to read more. Like, I was sad that I was that sleepy because I just wanted to keep reading it. So Tiffany D. Jackson hits again. I've loved every single one of her books that I've read. She's fantastic. This one continues to deliver. I'm gonna read you the flat, but I'm not gonna read you the whole flat because I read this a minute ago and was like, oh, I wish that I hadn't, because at the end of this blurb is a plot point that I still haven't got to yet, despite the fact that I'm almost halfway through, and I'm like, kind of wish that I didn't know this was happening. I must have read this when I bought it and then just forgot, but actually maybe probably not, because I just implicitly trust Tiffany D. Jackson. I'm like, I don't need your marketing copy. I will just buy it regardless. But so I'm gonna cut off the end so that you don't know what I now know. Anyway, Jordan Monroe is finally free. Out from under her overprotective parents, Jordan is ready to kill it in pre-law at a prestigious, historically black university in Washington, D.C. Kappa parties and student government better watch their backs. And she's not the only one. When her roommate's brother is released from prison, the last thing Jordan expects is to come home and find the ex-convict on their dorm room sofa. But Devontae needs a place to stay while he gets back on his feet, and how could she say no to one of her new best friends? Devontae is older, and as charming as he is intelligent, pushing every student he meets to make better choices about their young lives. But Jordan senses something sinister beneath his friendly advice and growing group of followers. That's all I'm going to tell you. So Tiffany D. Jackson has written several books now that start with the seed of like a very sensational news story that she then writes a fictionalized version of. So for instance, Grown, which you can kind of see the corner of a face here. So that is a fictionalized version of the R. Kelly story. That book is so phenomenal. Cannot recommend that highly enough. 12 out of 10. But so I'm not surprised that this is another fantastic entry in that category. The tone of this one is just, she is so good at writing in this way where like you can feel the tension and the sinister undercurrents, but also still see why the main character is like in this vulnerable and precarious place and isn't able to extricate themselves, even though you can so clearly see that something is wrong, and you can see that they can partly see that something is wrong, but she just nails the tone so well. It's more subtle than the vibe of like a horror movie, right? When you see people like innocently walking out into the dark woods and parting ways and you're like, why would you not stick together? Like it's not that glaring. It's more like, have you ever seen, someone made an edit of Gilmore Girls where they took specifically the scenes of Dean with where I'm not Team Dean. That's a whole other video, but not Team Dean. And someone made a cut showing Rory and Dean's relationship set to like a horror movie soundtrack.
Dean.
Hi. Rory.
Rory. So, how you liking Moby Dick?
Oh, it's really good. Hey, how did you know I was reading Moby Dick?
I've been watching you.
So effective. And that to me is what this is giving, like what's actually going on the page so far, at least. I don't know what's gonna happen, but it's nowhere near as blatantly horrifying as what would happen in a horror movie, but the creepy vibe is there. It's like, it's unsettling, and it's just nailing it as usual. I'm so into this book. Usually I want to finish recording and just go knit, but I'm like, maybe I just want to read all day. Read it. What else do I need to tell you about? Okay, we have to do another watching update because Love is Blind. Love is Blind, top tier media, if you ask me. Love a dating reality show in general, but particularly like the more seriously they take themselves, the more I love them, despite how like unhinged it is. And like, we all know that like most of these relationships aren't going to work out. Even if they do get married, they're probably still going to get divorced. But the more marriage focused they are, the more fascinating I find them because the higher stakes they feel. And I'm just more interested in people who like at least think that they're making like rational life decisions and are trying to bond on a deep level, more so than like, oh, I'm just here to like cook up for summer and whatever. Like I was gonna say I'm too old for that, but I've just also never been that person. Like I've just always been like more seriously minded in these respects. So I'm so much more invested in like The Bachelor, Love is Blind, etc. So new Love is Blind season. Big week for me. This is where my filming schedule is a little bit awkward because all this is kind of old news. Like TV shows are a little more timely than the status of my knitting projects, but Love is Blind. This season in Denver. What's going on in Denver? I'm worried about Denver. Like, when is the show not a disaster? But never has the show been such a disaster. Such a disaster. Like, what do I even say about Love is Blind? So at the point that I am currently, I've seen the first 6-episode drop and then the subsequent 3-episode drop. So I haven't gotten to the weddings and stuff yet. I think that will have happened by the time this goes live. How did it come to be that the only couple that I like and think maybe should get married is the one that I least thought should get engaged? Like, how are Sparkle, Megan, and Jordan the ones that I'm rooting for? Justice for Patrick. Oh my god. That was an excruciating plotline to watch. Wow. Also that apparently Mike is just like a full-on real-life scammer. Fascinating. What else? What else is going on in the show? Oh my god. I literally, when Edmund and Calabria got engaged in the pods, I was like, oh my god, they are like the most perfect couple I've ever seen come out of a show. I've never been as excited about a couple as I am about these two. I love them. Have I ever seen my feelings turn around so quickly on a couple? Wow. Oh, speaking of feelings being determined in one single moment, Nick and Annie, never to be redeemed for me ever. Their conversation about if their children were, to quote them, LGBTQ+, which I feel like just the discomfort with which someone tries to say anything about the queer community, I think tells you a lot about their sentiments, just the comfort or lack thereof with which they address a group of people. It could tell you a lot. So that was kind of enough, but all of the things they said afterward were entirely too much, and those are not people I will be interested in following and wishing good things for the rest of the show, which is unfortunate because it seems like they're kind of the ones doing the best. They're kind of the ones most likely to be happy, and I simply don't care. You lost your privileges of me being invested in you by saying terrible things. And it's kind of upsetting to me that so far this season that has not been balanced out. Like, Love is Blind has often shown people having difficult conversations about like controversial topics, and I feel like historically it's really been pushing in the direction of being progressive. And this feels like a real regressive thing that I worry is them trying to like mirror back the direction that politics are shifting away from queer rights and trans rights and all of these things that I'm like, it's horrifying to watch happen in real life, and it is demoralizing to see that starting to be represented in media that used to feel more progressive. And it's like, are we just giving into this now? Like, I was kind of waiting for another couple to have a conversation that went the opposite way, and so it would feel more like documentarian, like this is just what these people believe and this is what these people believe, and you can like make your own conclusions based on that. But the fact that that's the only conversation that we saw touching on this is alarming to me, kind of. So that's kind of on watch for me. I'm kind of wary of the direction these things are tipping. So yeah, it would be super fun for this to all be really like nice and lighthearted and not feel like it was reflecting broader downturns for society. But unfortunately, reality TV, much like non-reality TV, are, I think, inextricably linked to what's going on in the world. So that was bad. And somehow Megan and Jordan are the only ones I'm rooting for. And Jordan is the one that I'm rooting for, which is, it's scary because I'm like, almost never does a man end the show without doing something that makes me dislike him by the end. And he is just so far so much more likable at this stage of the show than any other man has ever been. And the higher the pedestal, the further they fall. So I'm just like, I'm so braced to be so disappointed by Jordan. So he might be the first one I like actually really like by the end, and that's an accomplishment, you know? I hope he can do it. Hi, Copper. Did you come to show off your bandana? Come here. No, you're gonna scratch yourself instead? But the people want to see your bandana. Hi, good buggy. Oh, your bandana's not in frame. Okay, in your spot. Now turn around. There, you see his little skulls? You're not in focus. Oh, if I lean out of the way. Look at you with your skull bandana. You're so festive. All right, yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all that I've got for you today. So thank you so much for coming to knit with me. I would love to know how your fall knitting is going. Are you checking things diligently off the list? Are you so off the rails? How's it going? And if you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you already have, you're my favorite. And I'll see you next time.